Thank you, Shannon. It's nice to be here today.
I'm gonna share our screen really quick. Great.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Claudia and I are presenting on what we think is an important issue. So the title of our presentation is 21st Century Libraries and the Gatekeeping Crisis. We would like to acknowledge, oops, what happened there? We would like to acknowledge Arizona State University's 4 campuses are located in the Salt River Valley on ancestral territories of indigenous peoples, including the Acoma, Otham, Pima, and Peepash, Maricopa Indian communities, whose care and keeping of these lands allows us to be here today. My name is Julie Tanaka. I'm the Rare Books and Manuscript Librarian and also the interim head of distinctive collections at Arizona State University. And I moved here from South Bend, Indiana in 2010 with my cat, who's the escape artist you see in the picture there. And I'm joined today by my colleague.
Hi, everybody. I'm Claudia Willett. I am the Senator McCain Papers archivist at ASU Library. And I moved to Phoenix from Boston in 2018. With all cats present and accounted for.
One of the issues facing our unit here at ASU, and I'm sure at other institutions across the country, is really thinking critically and evaluating not only our own spaces and services, but also our professional practices and ethos. And one of the major barriers that we're trying to overcome is gatekeeping. And we've kind of come to the conclusion that what this boils down to is about us as being a repository hoarding knowledge. And it comes with a huge price tag, which prevents people from just being curious for the sake of curiosity. We have all of these interesting materials here, and if a person needs a so-called legitimate reason to come in and see it, it doesn't allow them to be curious, to see what's there, to share knowledge, share experiences. So we're trying to find a way around this, but we have to get around a couple of forces first. And we're going to call these the boring problem and the exclusion problem.
So as Julie mentioned, we are really trying to overcome this longstanding barrier of gatekeeping. The professionalization of library and archival work over time is in line with the idea of information organization as the method for exclusion. And what we're experiencing today speaks to that lingering legacy. It just manifests itself in the newest iteration of our 21st century reality in the spaces where we work. So the boring problem, especially now, people don't view the services that we provide as, spaces for instant gratification, things that are even for them when they can just find it online. When in reality, collections and collecting practices are dynamic, and we do this work for everyone. So figuring out how to craft a new message around this work to overcome this sense of boringness and, in a sense, being unwelcoming for that reason is really essential. And this is coupled with the exclusion problem. So people also don't have an incentive to come into the library if they feel like, I can't, like none of these things are for me. When in reality, archives and libraries can partner with anyone, can support anyone's interests. And it forces us as professionals in institutions to align our actions with the value or mission statements of our workplaces. There shouldn't be this sense of exclusion based on not having a shared foundational knowledge about libraries and archives. And this really speaks to the opportunity gap that can develop in a prospective learner's experience as early as kindergarten. And it is something that we need to take into account when we're thinking about how to bring people into libraries. We can no longer perpetuate the achievement gap if we want to be the institutions that we laud ourselves to be, the last frontier of true democracy and equality. What we need to be thinking about when we develop these experiences is that it is not a failure of the learner to not know everything when we think they should know it. It is more likely a reflection of the loss or lack of opportunity that is tied to a greater social problem, much larger than their day-to-day life choices, struggles, and efforts.
So to increase the opportunities for everyone to learn and to discover, we're adopting a model of being allies rather than gatekeepers. Our role now as allies aligns with ASU's charter, which is we are a comprehensive public research university, measured not by whom it excludes, by whom it includes and how they succeed. Like many institutions, our department faces the structural and legacy issues, not to mention vanishing budgets and being severely understaffed. To address these, we've adapted here not to perpetuate old ideas of gatekeeping, but rather to prioritize the safety, and that's to prioritize the safety of our collections over community engagement and use, but rather we're also looking to look past what we've been told numerous times recently to do more with less. Our focus now is to effectively use what we do have, the resources that we have, the staff that we have, to provide the type of access and service that we're trying to aspire to provide. We're taking on the role now as allies, not as gatekeepers. So to break down the barriers that we're facing, one of the major things here is in the past, there's been a tradition, and I'm sure many of you who have walked into a reading room have heard, the reading room is for serious researchers doing legitimate research. No. Behind me, the background to my screen is a picture of the Würzburger Reading Room here at Hayden Library. We've tried to make it a much more welcoming space in comparison to the very imposing image of Hayden Library that you see behind Claudia. So we're focused on providing physical access to our collections to everyone. We're promoting learning, encouraging curiosity, and we're getting past some of the traditional barriers. And we can't talk about everything today, but we want to highlight a few things that are very much in process right now to break down things such as age barriers, the serious researcher doing legitimate research idea. For example, we had a high school student recently who needed to use a Navajo English lexicon, and ASU has 3 copies, 2 of which are in our circulating collections and 1 in distinctive collections. He was turned down by ASU's OpenStax staff. So the library here has an age restriction. You have to be at least 18 years old to qualify for a community lending card. So he wasn't quite sure what he was going to do. He really needed this for a class project he was working on. Distinctive Collections hosted him. We don't have an age barrier here. We've moved beyond that to provide access. So we invited him into our reading room. He used our copy. He was able to complete his assignment and sent a note later on thanking us for making this possible. In another instance, a high school student contacted Distinctive Collections because he was curious to see our materials. He had noticed online that we had quite a few art-related collections, and he found a couple of pieces that he was really interested in seeing because it aligned with his interest in drawing. So we said, sure, come on in. He scheduled an appointment. So we made sure we had all of our materials here because a lot of our materials are stored off site. And he came in and saw it. And we also at the same time brought out a few additional items because we knew he was interested. He was an artist and we thought maybe he, would like to see these 4 other pieces. So we brought those out and he spent over an hour here looking at the materials. And all of this is just part of us trying to encourage people to be curious, to come in, to see our collections, and not see the reading room as a hindrance. And finally, my third example about us providing access and breaking down barriers. is establishing campus partnerships. We've partnered with ASU Gamage, which is the Performing Arts Center on campus, and its education unit, whose mission is connecting communities. Last week, we welcomed 2 groups of students. So there were 60 students total. These are theater students and 6 chaperones from Title I high schools just outside of Phoenix proper. They were on campus to learn more about different careers in the performing arts outside of acting. So they spent the afternoon at the Gamage, and then they came over to Distinctive Collection Store Reading Room that you see behind me. And we showed them materials that were going to be featured in the production of Hamilton that they were attending later that evening. So they saw a first edition of the Federalist Papers, the so-called Reynolds pamphlet, Washington's farewell address that was printed in the Independent Chronicle. And we were showing them these original historical documents that they were going to hear referenced in the songs. And we even had a few students start singing the passages from the songs and engaging them to show them how these historical materials were used in the modern production and continued the conversation on. We also pulled out some materials from our theater collections, just mask designs with the sketches leading up to the final product of the actual mask, just to encourage them that there's a whole lot here that's available for them to come in and to see, that they didn't have to be at the university, they didn't have to be a researcher, but they could use these and hopefully inspire some creativity for them. So these are some of the physical access issues that we're having. We're trying to break down these barriers as we move forward. But we also have other barriers that we're classifying as intellectual access.
So this kind of speaks to a little bit about what we were talking about when we were thinking about gatekeepers, the people who you think of, the professor you don't want to take a class with because they always grade really hard or their content is really, difficult to navigate. Libraries can be perceived in that same way, that we're knowledge hoarders instead of knowledge sharers. And so we need to view ourselves as partners in information exploring and sharing. So this can look like working with traditional partners. We worked with a 300 level Methods of Inquiry English course, and it was so successful that the professor brought us in to work on an asynchronous version of the module that we provided for her class. And so you think of English class as a traditional partner, but this can also lend itself to community inquiry. We did a 2-hour presentation with the Black Family Genealogy and History Society of Phoenix. It was an intro to archival research presentation, and we really focused on applying the themes and practices of research and archival theory to government records, to materials in manuscript collections, to kind of piece together parts of their family histories that they still are trying to work through. And even further, we've started to work with non-traditional partners. So we have connected with a Barrett Honors College mathematician and faculty member who's interested in critical social theory. And he originally came to us to talk about a Herbert Marcuse conference, and it has now transformed into a specific day designated to a workshop on archival research and access. And so that's coming up in a couple of weeks. We'll see how that goes. But he's also said that he would like to leverage that relationship into future opportunities to help students craft capstone projects or thesis projects.
So as we're navigating the physical and intellectual barriers, we also have to deal with the very true fact of institutional barriers, dwindling budgets, insufficient staff, administration, so on and so forth, in order to provide the type of access and service that we want to provide. So to do this, we're going about it as just get it done. And we'll ask questions later. We'll ask for forgiveness later. But
yeah, we're not going to ask questions later. We'll have already done what we're going to do.
Well, we might ask questions. Anyway, really, we're moving away to from the do more with less theory and just trying to get some good work done. So 3 things in particular. We're doing guerrilla backlog processing, exactly what it sounds like. We've got a huge 100+ year backlog, and we're just going to start processing collections, getting together when time allows, working as a team. We're also in the process right now of writing up a new reappraisal and deaccessioning policy that we're hoping to get through our associate university librarian and university librarian for approval, because we've had varying practices here over many, many years, and some of our collections do need to be reappraised and would probably be best served by being deaccessioned and transferred to a different institution, or in some cases discarded or returned to the donor. And finally, we're promoting cross-unit collaboration because, again, we have a very limited staff and we have a lot of talent throughout the library. So by working together across units, breaking down the silos, we think, and we've already seen this happen so far, we can get a lot more work done much more efficiently. And again, this is all about utilizing the resources at our disposal without having to sit there and, basically say the same thing over and over again. We need more staff, we need more staff. And there are certain circumstances that just don't allow for that right now. So we're trying our best. Claudia, do you want to add to that?
I do want to add to that just a little bit to say that our OpenStack side also does not have a definitive reappraisal and deaccessioning policy. It is typically, if there are 2 of something, then anything extra goes. As far as I've found in my research on our side's reappraisal and deaccessioning policy. So this is a library-wide issue. And we're hoping to be able to, cross-collaborate, as Julie mentioned, even to benefit our colleagues in OpenStax who also struggle with not having sufficient metadata and cataloging teams. So we're really hoping to expand this as broadly as we can. So if there are any questions, if we have time, we're happy to answer them.
Yes, sorry.
Please take down our contact information if you want to follow up with us. We're happy to chat more.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Julie. And I think we can go over a little bit. So if it's okay with both of you, we'll maybe go until 11:50, so we have time for some questions. So one question that came into the chat is, what are examples of some materials that are up for consideration for deaccessioning?
So one example was a gift that we took in that doesn't fit within ASU's current collecting scope. And after discussions in our unit and also with the donor, we feel that it would be best served to start the process for deaccession and return to the donor in this case. There are many issues involved with this, and since it's the first time that we're doing it where it involves a donor, we're working through that right now through our department and some of the ASU risk management. So that's one issue. I know Claudia has another one on her mind.
Yes, so there's also kind of a legacy of varied approaches to how we manage appraisal and acquisition, so the front end of the process. That has really just encouraged taking things in with no commitment to making it processed, available, described in a timely manner. And so creating a reappraisal and deaccessioning policy will help mitigate the just lingering effects of, and I think our expectation is a 75-year with a full archival staff to process everything in our backlog. So it's really identifying the things that are in the collection that have not been processed and are out of scope of their collection. And there is no way that we can reasonably provide stewardship and care for the collection. And having a pathway to navigate reappraisal and deaccessioning in a way that doesn't have to be as complicated as what Julie was describing with this gift that was accepted without consideration of whether or not it was appropriate for our collections. So it really is sort of based on the collecting scope and our ability to care for it is how we're starting to think about these decisions.
I see
Thank
another
you.
question about cross-unit collaboration when other units.
That was the next one I was going to read. Yes, yes, please. So
thank you so much for asking that. Exactly right.
Could I read it aloud though for the recording? I'm sorry, I just want to read it aloud for the full question for the recording. Please. Yeah, so how do you sell cross-unit collaboration if folks in other units are also faced with doing more with less and are already doing too much?
So we've found that just talking to people and realizing that you have the same frustrations and you have a similar view on how they could be resolved easily has been our most successful approach. That's how we've kind of cobbled together our guerrilla processing team. It was just from across unit in our directorate, a conversation that led us to all say, what happens if we just got together and processed the most recent accession that came in? So we did it, and we processed a 10-box gift in one day, and it was up in archive space the week after. And we were like, oh, wow, we are onto something. So it really doesn't have to be like a sales pitch. It really is just like talking to people about how you see how things are going and where you think things can go. And you will find people who have the same ideas. And all you have to say is, hey, do you want to just try this and see what happens? And they'll probably say yes. So that's what we've been doing so far.
But also being willing to help out other people too when they come to us. So it's not just one-sided, right? This has to be, it has to go both ways because we realize other units need help too. So all pitching in.
Yep.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. And so next up on my list of questions here is gatekeeping always bad? I feel like it can combat like cultural appropriation. I'm not sure if I read it right. I don't know how to ally with someone who has an incorrect understanding of something. I don't know if I have a correct understanding of the question. But I guess the fundamental question is gatekeeping always bad? Maybe that it can come across like cultural gatekeeping can combat cultural appropriation. I finally grokked the question. I think yes. The questioner has clarified in the chat, gatekeeping protects culture sometimes. Thank you for clarifying. Does that make sense?
Yes, we got there. Thank you for clarifying on that question. So I think just off the top for me, the premise of keeping people away from things out of a sense of our interpretation of what is protecting something is not a sufficient case to make for not reevaluating the way that we will ultimately end up excluding more people than the people that we may disagree with. And there are still the protections in our shared spaces where if it's something really meaningful and important to a culture or a community group that is part of the ASU community or greater community or wherever you are, there can be ways to manage those kinds of complicated interactions. But that responsibility of providing access does not change, in my opinion, based on someone's intent or someone's understanding or misunderstanding of history. That's just my feeling off the top, but Julie may have a different response.
No, I agree with you, Claudia. And I think in some ways, I understand that gatekeeping in some ways can protect culture, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. But because of ASU's mission here to provide access to everyone, of its embeddedness within our local communities here. In our case here at ASU, I think it's even more imperative for us to try to break down as many of the barriers that have existed here and open things up. And it's not to say at some point in time we may have to make some modifications and changes and things like that, but right now we really are trying to move in that direction with full support of the university and our university librarian to advocate for bringing more people in, not just our students and faculty, traditional researchers, but even members of our local community. So again, a lot of what we present today are things that are very much in process right now. We're trying it out. We are constantly analyzing what's happening, what the results are, and where we're going to go from here. But we really did want to throw this out today and hopefully get some other feedback. Again, I know there's some other questions. If you have any other questions, or if you want to talk about any of the issues that we brought up, we're more than happy to talk to people, email, Zoom, anything like that, our contact information and stuff. So we do invite further conversation.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julie and Claudia, for your wonderful presentation. You're getting lots of bravos in the chat. Thank you for going a little longer so that we could get that fabulous Q&A going. And there were more questions we didn't have time to talk about. So yes, we can continue the conversation directly with you. We also have our hashtag. Wait, let me point the right direction. Our hashtag is LAUC-B 2021. So we can check for tweets and other social media posts. So thanks again.